The boy
Daddy!
didn't
Whoa.
scream, "Daddy!"
Daddy!
He didn't
Son!
cry.
Son,
He
I
walked
thought I
straight
lost
through
you! Oh
400
my
people who were
God!
terrified
Wait,
of
what's
Lucian
happening?
Ferraro stopped in front of him and pulled a folded piece of paper out of his jacket pocket. A crayon drawing, a man in a black suit with a black bird on his neck. Then he reached up, tugged Lucian's collar aside with two small fingers, pressed his palm flat against the tattoo and spoke. "I found you. I did it right." The woman across the room dropped her glass because her son hadn't said a single word in 14 months. If this story grabs you, hit subscribe and stay with me all the way to the end, because what happens in the last 20 minutes changes everything you think you know about this man. And drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels tonight. Lucian Ferraro had been to 51 weddings, and he had never once needed to remember a single one. He arrived at the Castellano reception 11 minutes late, and the 11 minutes were not an accident. Nothing about him was ever an accident. The black suit was cut by a tailor in the North End who had been dressing Ferraro men for 3 generations. The white shirt was open, 2 buttons, not carelessness, a decision. Everyone in that room knew what lived under his collar, and he wanted them to see just enough of it to remember. He handed his coat to a girl who couldn't have been 20 and who wouldn't meet his eyes. "Thank you," he said. She looked up startled. Nobody ever expected him to say that. Rafe Ortiz fell into step at his left shoulder, close but half a pace behind the way he'd walked for 6 years. "Belandi's people are here," Rafe said. "Corner table, 6 of them. I saw them from the door. They're watching you. Everyone's watching me. That's why I came." Dominic Salvo was already inside holding a drink. He wasn't drinking, and he raised 2 fingers when Lucian entered the small, private signal that meant all clear, all counted, all managed. 11 years of that signal. Lucian nodded back without thinking about it, the way a man nods at his own reflection. "How long do we stay?" Rafe asked. 40 minutes, long enough that leaving isn't a story. And if Belandi comes over, then we stay 50. He took a glass of champagne he had no intention of drinking, positioned himself where he could see 3 exits, and began the slow circuit of the room. He'd made 100 times in 100 rooms exactly like this one. Men shook hand, a half-second too long. Women looked, then looked away. An old man from the Ravello family gripped his forearm and said something about his father, and Lucian said he'd have liked that, "You said so," and moved on. I was 38 years old, and he had never in his adult life been surprised in a room like this. He was 4 minutes from being surprised. It started with the back of a neck. He didn't see her face. He saw a woman near the cake table turned away from him. Dark hair pinned up in a hurry, one loose strand at the base of her skull that she kept pushing at without noticing she was doing it. He stopped walking. Rafe nearly walked into him. "Boss?" Lucian didn't answer. Something under his ribs had gone wrong. Not fast, not dramatic, just wrong like a bone, remembering an old break before the weather changes. She laughed at something. He heard it across 40 feet of noise. He knew that laugh. He'd known that laugh for 6 years the way a man knows a song he'd deliberately stopped playing. "Who is she?" he said. It wasn't a question. Rafe followed his eyes. Went quiet in a way that told Lucian he already understood. "Sophie's college roommate," Rafe said. "The brides, they stayed close." "You should have flagged it." "I didn't know the name meant anything." "It means something." Nora Vance turned her head 3 degrees. That was all it took. 6 years collapsed into nothing. He had a plan inside of 2 seconds because that was what he was, a man who built plans faster than other men built sentences. He would cross the floor. He would say her name once. He would let her see that he was exactly as fine as he had spent 6 years pretending to be. 4 minutes of controlled conversation, and then he would walk away first, and the walking away first would settle something he'd never been able to settle. He got 1 step, then the crowd did that thing crowds do when something small is moving through them. Fast, a ripple, a parting, people looking down instead of across. And a boy came out of the gap. I was 5, maybe 6. Small for it. Thin wrists, a borrowed suit jacket, a full size too big, the shoulders hanging off him. Dark hair. And there was something about his mouth, a faint blue-gray cast to his lips, that a doctor would have noticed in a second, and that Lucian, who noticed everything, noticed and did not understand. The boy walked up to him, not shy, not fast, the unhurried certainty of someone arriving somewhere he'd already decided to go. Lucian looked down. "You lost, kid." The boy didn't answer. He reached into his jacket instead and pulled out a square of paper folded into quarters, soft at the creases from being folded and unfolded 100 times. He opened it carefully with both hands the way you handle something valuable. Lucian looked at it. Crayon, a man in a black suit, and on the neck of the man drawn in heavy black wax pressed so hard the paper had torn slightly, a bird. Lucian's hand moved toward his own collar before he told it to. The boy got there first. Two small fingers hooked the edge of his shirt and pulled it aside, exposing the broken-winged hawk that ran from Lucian's throat down under the white cotton. Then the boy laid his whole palm flat against it. His hand was warm. It was so small, it didn't cover the wing. And he said in a voice that came out cracked and rusted and much too quiet, "I found you. I did it right." The room didn't go silent all at once. It went silent in rings spreading outward, the nearest conversations. First, then the next, then the band, faltering, then 400 people in formal wear, looking at the most dangerous man in Boston with a child's hand on his chest. But Lucian Ferraro didn't hear any of it, because somewhere behind him a glass hit the floor and shattered, and a woman made a sound he had never heard a human being make. Not a scream. Something torn out from underneath a scream. He turned. Nora Vance was on her knees on the ballroom floor. Her hand was over her mouth. Her whole body was shaking, and she wasn't making any effort to hide it, which frightened him more than anything else, because Nora Vance did not shake. Nora Vance had once stitched a man's arms shut on her kitchen table while making a joke about the weather. "Nora," he said. She couldn't answer. She was staring at her son, and she was trying to breathe and failing. A woman near her, Sophie the bride still in her dress, dropped down beside her. "Nora, Nora, honey, what?" He talked. It came out in pieces. "Sophie," he talked. What he talked. And Sophie Castellano on her own wedding day put both arms around her friend and started to cry. Lucian understood in that moment that he had walked into a room with a plan and the room had a plan of its own. He crouched. He did it slowly, the way you approach an animal that has decided to trust you and might change its mind. He got down until his eyes were level with the boys, and then he made himself hold still. And he saw them, dark, slightly tilted at the outer corner. The exact flat steadiness that people had been calling cold his entire life. His own eyes were looking back at him out of a 5-year-old's face. "What's your name?" Lucian said. His voice came out wrong, lower than he meant. The boy studied him. Then he lifted the drawing again and pointed at it. At the bird. "Yeah," Lucian said. "That's mine. That's on me." The boy nodded once, satisfied, like a man closing a file. "You want to tell me your name?" "Nothing." "Okay," Lucian said. "That's okay. You already told me the important part." Behind him the room came back to life, and it came back wrong. Not chaos, worse. Recalibration. 400 people all doing arithmetic at the same time. He caught the fragments the way you catch shrapnel. Ferraro's got a kid. Look at the eyes. Look at the whose is she? The mother whose is nobody knew. Nobody knew. 6 men at the Belandi table reached for their phones in the same motion like birds turning. Rafe was at his shoulder. "Boss, we need to move. Right now." "I know. Every family in this city is going to have this in 20 minutes. "I know, Rafe." "Then tell me what you want." Lucian stood up, and when he stood, the boy's hand came away from his chest, and Lucian felt the absence of it like something had been taken. He looked at Dominic Salvo across the room. Dominic was already moving toward him, already smoothing the crowd back with that hand of his, already doing his job, and his face was exactly as blank as it had been for 11 years. Exactly. Which Lucian thought, and the thought arrived from nowhere and would not leave, was strange. Because everyone in that ballroom had just changed expression. Every single person, 400 faces, had done something. Dominic's hadn't done anything at all, like a man watching a scene he'd already read the script for. "Duca," Dominic said, "do you want the side room or do you want the car?" "Side room." "Understood." Dominic. "Yes." Lucian looked at him for 1 second longer than was comfortable. "Nothing. Get me the room." Nora was on her feet by then. She'd pulled herself together the way surgeons do, fast, complete, nothing left showing. She crossed the floor and got a hand on her son's shoulder and pulled him back against her legs, and only then did she look up. "Don't," she said. "I haven't said anything." "You're about to." "Nora, you don't get to say my name like that." "Like what?" "Like you're allowed to." The boy tilted his head back to look at his mother, then over at Lucian, then back at his mother, following it like a tennis match, entirely unbothered. 10 minutes, Lucian said. No. 10 minutes and then you walk out of here and I don't follow you and I don't look for you. My word. She laughed. It was the worst sound he'd ever heard her make. Your word. Yes. Do you have any idea, she said very quietly so that only he could hear it, what your word cost me? And there it was, something in her voice that he hadn't expected and couldn't place, not grief, not even hate. Something settled. The tone of a woman referring to a fact both of them supposedly knew. What are you talking about? He said. She stared at him. Nora, what am I supposed to have? Don't. Her voice cracked and she hated it. He could see her hate it. Don't you dare stand in front of me in a room full of these people and pretend you don't know. I don't know. 6 years, Lucian. I don't know. And for the first time, something moved behind her eyes, just a flicker. The specific flicker of a compass needle finding interference. She looked away first. 10 minutes, she said, not 1 second more. Rafe got them a service corridor and a storage room behind the kitchens. Dominic held the door. Lucian passed through it and stopped half a step and looked back into the ballroom one more time. In an old habit, count the room before you leave the room. 400 faces, all of them turned toward him, except one. At the last table by the terrace doors, an older man in a gray suit sat alone with a glass of red wine, silver hair, 60 maybe more. Everyone in that room had turned to watch the Ferraro child cross the floor. He hadn't turned at all. He was facing the wrong way entirely, looking out at the water, and he was smiling a small, private, patient smile. The smile of a man in an audience who has seen this play before and is enjoying the part where the actors finally catch up. Lucian's eyes caught on him for less than a second. Some customs broker, Ward or Wardell, harbor paperwork. He'd shaken the man's hand at 4 events in a decade and had never once put him in a column that mattered. He filed it and let it go. He would think about that smile again, in 9 days in the dark, in the back of a car with his son's heartbeat under his hand, and he would understand that it had been the only honest face in the entire building. The storage room had a bad light and a door that closed, and the door that closed was the only thing about it Lucian cared about. Nora got the boy settled on a folding chair by the wall. She crouched in front of him and pushed his hair back and did something with her thumb against his cheek. Baby, stay right here, okay, don't move. The boy looked at her, then at Lucian, then back. Are you going to fight with the man, he asked. Her hand stopped. She closed her eyes. Her mouth did something she couldn't control, and Lucian watched a woman he'd known for years take 3 full seconds to master her own face. We're going to talk, she said. Talking is fighting. Sometimes. She kissed his forehead. Not always. She stood up. She turned around. And whatever she'd been holding together out there, she left it on the other side of the door. Say it, she said. Say what? Whatever you came in here to say. Say it, and then we're done. How old is he? Don't. Nora, how old? 5, she said. He'll be 6 in October. Lucian did the arithmetic. He'd been doing it since the boy's hand touched his chest, and it had come out the same every time. Don't stand there calculating, as she said. He's not a shipping schedule. I'm not calculating. You are. I can see you doing it. You do it with your jaw. I'm trying to understand what happened. And Nora Vance laughed again, and this time it wasn't even a laugh. It was something scraped off the bottom of 6 years. You're trying to understand what happened. Yes. You know what happened? I don't. You wrote it down, she said. You wrote it down and you signed it and you had it hand-delivered to my apartment, so don't stand there. She stopped, because Lucian had gone very still. Not the stillness of a man caught. The other kind. The kind that comes over a man when the floor he's standing on turns out to be a lid. Say that again, he said. Don't do this. Nora, say it again, slowly. The letter, she said. What letter? Your letter. I have never, Lucian said, and his voice came out so quiet that she leaned in without meaning to, written you a single word in my life. And in the corner, in the bad light, on a folding chair, the boy who hadn't spoken in 14 months looked up from the drawing in his lap and watched both of them with his father's steady, unblinking eyes. Orchestrated climactic narrative arc, hospital crisis, surgical stakes, federal intervention, exiles, surrender revelation, orchestrated climactic narrative arc, hospital crisis, surgical stakes, federal intervention, exile, surrender revelation. They took him out of Lucian's arms at the door. That was the part nobody warns you about. Not the sirens, not the running. The part where somebody in scrubs says sir twice and then just takes him, and your hands are suddenly holding nothing, and you're standing in a doorway. You have no authority in whatsoever. Sir, you have to let go. I've got him. Sir, let go. Lucian let go. Parents can come to the second set of doors, a woman said, already moving, already gone. Nora went with them. She went with them, talking rattling numbers times doses, the whole medical history of her son's life, delivered at a dead run to strangers who were writing it down as she said it. And then she went through a door, and the door swung shut, and Lucian Ferraro stopped at a red line painted on the floor because a $19 sign told him to. He stood there. For the first time since he was 22 years old, there was not a single thing he could buy, threaten, move, or arrange. Boss, Rafe came up beside him, holding his own shoulder, his shirt gone dark down one side. Boss, I need to get that looked at. It's through and through, it can wait. Rafe, Lucian didn't turn around. I can't have one more person in this building bleeding. Go. Rafe went. The surgeon came out 14 minutes later. A small woman with tired eyes who introduced herself as Adamola and did not waste one syllable. Are you his father? Lucian opened his mouth. Nothing came out. He had said my son 4 times that morning, to a driver, to a phone, to a man with a gun in his hand, and now a doctor asked him plainly, and his throat closed like a fist. He is, Nora said from behind him. He turned. She was there. Somebody had put her in a paper gown over her clothes, and she'd pushed the sleeves up, and her hands were still shaking with adrenaline she had no use for anymore. He's his father, she said again. Okay. Dr. Adamola looked between them. Then here's where we are. The valve's failing faster than the March imaging predicted. He's in decompensated failure. We stabilized him, but he's not going to hold, and I'm not comfortable sending him home to wait 9 days. Then don't, Lucian said. I'm proposing we go tonight, 6:30. Do it. Mr. Ferraro. I said do it. I need you to hear the rest of the sentence. She said it kindly, and she said it like a wall. He's 5, he's underweight, he's been in failure for hours, and going in tonight instead of next week means going in with a child who is already tired. That raises the risk, meaningfully, and the alternative also raises the risk. There is no version of tonight where somebody hands you a good option. Lucian stared at her. So I'm not asking you to be brave, Demola said. I'm asking you to pick. And Lucian Ferraro, who had chosen for other men, who had ended arguments in rooms full of people with one word, who had built an entire life on the principle that the man who decides fastest wins, looked at his hands and could not make them do anything. Nora, he said, yes, you pick. Her head came up. You've been picking for 6 years, he said. You picked with better information than I've ever had in my life. So you pick, and whatever you say, I'll stand behind it, and I won't say one word about it ever. Nora looked at him for 3 full seconds. Then she turned to the surgeon and said, tonight, 6 hours and 40 minutes. Lucian spent the first hour on his feet. He spent the second hour making calls because it was the only muscle he had left. He spent the third hour sitting. At the fourth hour, Nora fell asleep against his shoulder mid-sentence. She'd been talking about a coffee machine in a break room in Providence, something about how it never worked. And then she was out completely instantly, the way people go when the body finally sends the bill, and her head came down on his shoulder. Lucian didn't move for 41 minutes. His arm went numb, his back locked. A nurse walked past twice and looked at them and looked away. He had ordered men killed. He had sat across from federal agents and lied without a change in pulse. And he sat in a plastic chair in a cardiac waiting room and did not move a muscle because a woman who had every reason to hate him had fallen asleep on him by accident. And he was not going to be the reason she woke up. At 6 minutes past midnight, Dr. Adamola came out and pulled her mask down and said, "It went well." Nora made a sound and put both hands over her face. "Say it again," Lucian said. "It went well." Adamola almost smiled. "The repair held on the first try. He's in recovery. He'll be uncomfortable and cranky, and he'll hate everybody for about 4 days, and then he'll be a different kid than the one you brought in. Can we, one at a time, 10 minutes, and keep your voice down?" She looked at Lucian. "He's going to want to see you." "He doesn't know me." Sir Adamola said, "He asked for you twice while we were putting him under. I don't know what you did, but he asked for you." The boy woke up at 4:20 in the morning. Lucian was in the chair beside the bed and had been for 4 hours, and he had not blinked in what felt like most of them. Eli's eyes opened, went around the room, found him. For a long second, nothing happened. Then in a voice like tissue paper, "You look bad." Lucian laughed. It came out broken in half. "Yeah. Did I get fixed? You got fixed. Did it hurt you too?" And that was the one that went through him. Not the ballroom, not the dry dock, not the car. A 5-year-old coming up out of anesthesia and asking whether the pain had spread to anybody else. "A little," Lucian said. "Okay." Eli's eyes were already sliding shut again. He got one hand out from under the blanket and found the edge of Lucian's sleeve. "Stay. I'm not going anywhere. Not for a little." The boy's fingers closed on the fabric. "For all of it." "For all of it," Lucian said. "The rest of it took 11 days and none of it was clean." Dominic Salvo did not get a bullet. Everyone expected a bullet. Two of Lucian's own lieutenants came to him and said the word out loud, and Lucian listened to them and then said no. Hein gave Dominic to a federal agent named Claire Sorensen, who had been trying to get inside the harbor for 6 years, and he did it with a lawyer present and a signed statement and nothing off the record. "That's mercy?" Rafe asked him, arm in a sling. "That's not mercy." "It looks like mercy." "He spent 11 years wanting to matter," Lucian said. "Now he's going to spend the rest of his life as a case number in a filing cabinet, and nobody in this city will ever say his name again, except to explain who he sold out to." He shrugged. "Shoot a man and he's a legend by Friday. Let him live and he's paperwork forever." Toby Nash he put on a bus. No money, no name, no letter of any kind. Toby cried in the parking lot and asked what he was supposed to do now, and Lucian said something honest and walked away. And that was the last anyone heard of him. Silas Ward walked into the federal building on Cambridge Street on a Wednesday morning by himself. He surrendered everything, the 22 months, the network, 6 cities, all of it, and he asked for exactly one thing in return, which was that Sorensen let him talk to Lucian Ferraro for 10 minutes before it started. They gave him 7. "Is he alive?" Ward said before he'd even sat down. "He's alive." Ward closed his eyes. "He came out of it on the first try," Lucian said. "Ademola said the repair held clean. He's already complaining about the food." "Good." Ward's hands were flat on the table and they were not steady. "Good, good. You want to know something? Tell me." "When you opened those gates," Lucian said, "you gave up the only leverage you had. You knew that when you did it." "Yes." "Why?" Silas Ward looked up at him, and there was nothing left of the mildness at all. "Because I watched a 5-year-old go gray on a concrete floor," he said. "And for about 4 seconds, I was a father again, instead of whatever I've been building since. And I found out I couldn't do it." His mouth twisted. 22 months, Mr. Ferraro, and I couldn't do it for 4 seconds. Marianne would have... He stopped. He put his hand over his mouth and held it there. "She'd have been so ashamed of me," he said. Lucian sat with that. Then he said, "I'm going to do it." Ward looked up. "The thing you asked for. I'm doing it Thursday." "You don't have to. There's nothing left to hold over." "I know there isn't." "Then why?" "Because it's owed," Lucian said. "It was owed before you ever picked up a phone. You just made me hear it." Thursday, 4 families, a room on Congress Street, 31 men and 2 women who ran the moving parts of a city, all of them assuming they had been called there to divide up Silas Ward's carcass. Lucian Ferraro stood up and said, "In April of 2014, this organization cleared a container through the port of Boston. The product in it was cut with something that killed 9 people that month. One of them was named Marianne Ward. She was 24 years old. She was a customs broker's daughter, and she worked in a dentist's office in Quincy, and she was somebody's whole life." The room did not move. "I didn't sign the manifest," he said. "The man who did is dead, and I put him there for something else. But I took the chair, and I took the ledger with it, and I have collected on debts 30 years older than this one from men who never signed anything either. So I'm not going to stand here and be technical about it." Somebody at the back said, "Ferraro, I'm not finished." He wasn't. He put the harbor concessions on the table. The Southern Freight Line, 4 bonded warehouses, and the clearance arrangements that had made the Ferraro name mean something at that port for 2 generations. All of it split, sold, or transferred into a legitimate structure under an oversight agreement he had signed the previous morning with a federal prosecutor. Half of what his father had built. Gone in 90 seconds. The room came apart. Two of his own lieutenants walked out before he finished one of them, stopping at the door to say loud enough for the whole room, "A boss who apologizes isn't a boss." And Lucian said, "Then don't follow me," and let him go. Old Ravello asked flatly if Lucian had lost his mind. "Probably," Lucian said. But when it was over, a woman named Chu, who ran the logistics on the south side and whom Lucian had underestimated for a decade, stayed behind and said quietly, "Ward had a man inside my house too. 8 months. I know, it's in what I sent you. You could have used that." She studied him. "You could have traded it. Instead, you stood up and cut yourself in half in front of everybody." She picked up her coat. "You know what that actually did, don't you? Tell me." "There's nothing left to threaten you with," Chu said. "You just took every knife in this city and handed them back with the blades out." She paused at the door. "That's either the stupidest thing I've ever watched a man do, or it's the first genuinely dangerous thing anyone's done in 20 years. I haven't decided." He got to the hospital at 9 that night. Nora was in the chair by the bed with her feet up on the rail. Eli was asleep with a stuffed shark somebody had brought him. "How'd it go?" she said. "I lost the port." "Okay. Half of it. And 2 lieutenants." "Okay," she said again. He looked at her. "You don't have anything to say about that." "What do you want me to say? Congratulations." She took her feet off the rail. "Lucian, I'm glad. I'm genuinely glad. But I want to say something, and I want to say it while I can still say it right because I've been rehearsing it for 2 days." He sat down. "I'm not angry about the letter," Nora said. "Nora, let me finish. I thought I was. For 6 years, I thought that's what it was." Her voice stayed level and her eyes didn't. "I'm angry because when I read that letter, I believed it. In about 4 seconds. I never called you. I never showed up at your door and screamed at you. I read one page of somebody else's handwriting and I thought, well, of course. That's not because some part of me already thought I was the kind of thing a man like you puts down when it gets heavy," she said. "And Silas Ward didn't put that in me. That was already there. He just found it." Lucian couldn't speak. "So you can't fix that by being innocent," she said. "You can't fix it by cutting your empire in half or by saying a dead girl's name in a room full of gangsters. Those are good things. I'm not taking them from you. They just don't touch the thing that's actually broken." "Then tell me what does." "Time," Nora said. "That's it. That's the whole list. Time and you being exactly the same person every single time you walk through my door for a very long time until my body stops waiting for you to leave." She wiped her face fast. "And I can't promise you that ever works." "Okay. Don't say okay like it's—" "Nora." He leaned forward. "Tuesdays and Thursdays." She stopped. "What?" "You're going home. Your apartment, your job, his school, all of it. You don't owe me a house or a schedule or a second of your day." He said it evenly. "So I'm asking for two, Tuesdays and Thursdays. I'll drive every week. And if I'm ever late, not absent, late, you can end it, and I won't argue." Nora looked at him for a long moment. "That's a stupid rule," she said. "It's the only kind I know how to keep." And on the bed between them, without opening his eyes, a small voice said, "Tuesday is my swimming day," in the tone of a boy who had been listening to the entire conversation and considered the matter now closed. Tuesday was, in fact, his swimming day, and Lucian found that out the hard way in the first week when he showed up at 4, and Nora opened the door with wet hair and said, "You're an hour early and he's not allowed in a pool for 6 weeks, so congratulations. You get to be the one who tells him." He told him. Eli took it badly. Eli took it so badly that he refused to look at Lucian for 11 minutes and then without any warning climbed into his lap and fell asleep there. That was the first Tuesday. The second Tuesday, he was 6 minutes early and Nora said nothing about it. The third Tuesday, she had coffee out on the counter, 2 mugs, and she didn't say anything about that either. And Lucian understood he was not supposed to mention it, so he didn't. By the 5th week, he knew that Eli's teacher was Ms. Petrova, and was referred to with enormous respect. He knew there was a boy named Jacob who was discussed with the complicated hostility children reserved for people they secretly like. He knew that the walk from the school door to the parking lot took 11 minutes if the boy was in a hurry, and 23 if he decided the cracks in the sidewalk needed avoiding. He learned to do a French braid off a YouTube video with the sound off sitting on the floor of a 5-year-old's bedroom, because Eli had a friend with braids and wanted to know if a person could get one without being a girl about it. It took Lucian 40 minutes, and it was the single most humbling experience of his adult life. He was never late. Not once, not in a snowstorm in January, not the week Rafe got married, not the Thursday two men from the Belandi organization requested a meeting at 4 o'clock. And Lucian said, I can do 6, and the man across from him said 6 like it was a joke, and Lucian said 6 and did not explain. The story that got around the city was that Ferraro had gone soft. The story that got around later, the one that actually stuck, was that a Belandi capo had watched Lucian Ferraro end a negotiation at 3:40 in the afternoon over a matter worth $2 million, walk out to his car, and drive 40 minutes to sit in a parking lot outside an elementary school. Nobody could decide whether that made him weaker or considerably more frightening. Chu, when she heard it, laughed out loud and said, I've decided. In February, Nora let him stay for dinner. In March, she let him stay after dinner. In April, on a Thursday, she was standing at the sink and she said without turning around, Can I ask you something horrible? Yes. Do you ever think about the 6 years every day? What part? Lucian put the dish down. His first word, he said, whatever it was, whether he was in your arms or on the floor, whether you got it on your phone. He had never said this out loud. I think about the fact that there's a first word and I'll never know what it was, and neither will he because he doesn't remember, and there's nobody to ask but you. Nora's hands went still in the water. It was duck, she said. What? His first word was duck. He was 13 months old. We were in a laundromat in Providence and there was a duck on a detergent bottle. She was crying and laughing at the same time and still not turning around. He said it about 40 times. He said it for 2 straight days. I thought I was going to lose my mind. Lucian put both hands on the counter and bent his head. There, Nora said. Her voice was wrecked. Now you know. Now you know one. Nora. There's about 4,000 more, she said. And I'll tell you all of them. That's the deal. I'll tell you all of them, and you have to keep showing up. And eventually there'll be more that we both saw than ones you missed. She turned around then. She was still holding a plate, and her hands were wet, and she looked at him with her face completely open for the first time in 7 years. That's the only way I know how to do it, she said. Then that's how we do it, Lucian said. In May, a letter came to him from a federal facility in Pennsylvania. 2 pages handwritten in a hand that was steady and old-fashioned and instantly recognizable. And Lucian sat in his car in a parking garage for 20 minutes before he opened it. Silas Ward asked first about the boy. He asked how the scar was healing and whether the boy had been cleared for physical activity yet and whether he was still talking or whether the talking had stopped again after the surgery because Ward had read that it sometimes did. He wrote, I have no right to ask you any of this. I'm asking anyway. There's no one else in the world I can ask. He said the sentencing had gone the way it was always going to go. He said he expected to die inside and that this seemed correct to him. And at the end, he wrote, my daughter has been dead for 11 years, and until last spring, nobody had ever said her name out loud in a room that mattered. You did that. You did it after there was nothing left for me to trade, which is the only reason I believe it. I want you to understand that I know exactly what it cost you because I know what a port is worth. I have thought about it every day since. Not with gratitude. I'm not owed gratitude, and I'm not offering forgiveness because nobody put me in charge of that. I think about it because it means she existed. For 11 years, the whole world's position was that she was a statistic in a bad month. And now 4 families in Boston know her name. That's all I ever wanted, Mr. Ferraro. It took me 22 months and a great deal of harm to figure out that it was all I ever wanted. I would give anything to have understood it before I put your son on that floor. Do not write back. I don't want you to. I want you to be somewhere else. Lucian read it twice. Then he sat in the car and thought about a man who had built a machine out of grief because nobody would take a letter, and he put his head back against the seat and stayed there for a long time. He didn't write back. But that August, in the 4th week, an anonymous endowment was established at a hospice in Quincy, the one that had cared for a 24-year-old girl for the last 6 weeks of her life in an amount that made the director sit down. It was enough to fund the pediatric wing indefinitely. The only condition attached was the name, the Marianne Ward Family Room. Nobody ever traced it. Lucian never mentioned it to anyone, including Nora, and she found out 4 years later from a nurse she used to work with, and she never mentioned that she knew. There was another wedding in June. Sophie Castellano's younger brother. a quiet man named Paul who had been with the same woman for 9 years and had finally committed to the occasion with what appeared to be enormous relief. Outdoors by the water, a smaller crowd people who actually knew Paul instead of people who needed to be seen. They came together, which was still new enough to have a specific weight to it. Eli walked between them and held both their hands in an arrangement he had established in the parking lot with his usual absence of negotiation, and he talked the entire way in. He talked about the drive. He talked about a dog he'd seen. He talked about Jacob at length and unfavorably. He talked so much that Nora finally said, "Baby, breathe," and then had to stop walking for a second because a year ago she would have given 10 years of her life to have to say that sentence. At the tables, Eli tugged at his own collar and pulled his shirt open. 2 buttons, a gesture he had copied from somebody, and executed with tremendous seriousness, and pointed at the pink line running down the center of his chest. "See," he told a bewildered 8-year-old cousin. "I've got one too. Mine's newer." Lucian had to turn around and look at the water for 3 seconds. When he turned back, Nora was watching him. "You okay?" she said. "No." "Yeah," she said. "Me either." Price from the Bellandi organization was there, and he nodded at Lucian once from across the lawn, the specific nod that carries more weight than a handshake. She wasn't there, but sent a gift that arrived 2 days early with a card in her precise handwriting that read, "Appropriate that it started at one of these and ends better at another." Lucian read it 3 times before he understood what she meant, and then he put it in a drawer he didn't open often. Rafe was there with his wife and with the arm that would never quite work right again in cold weather, and at one point he found Lucian at the edge of the tent and said, "You know what nobody says out loud? Tell me that you're actually harder to get to now." Rafe watched the boy across the lawn. "Everybody thought you got soft, but you gave away the port. You put salvo in a federal file. You stood up and said a dead girl's name in front of everybody. There's not one thing left in this city anybody can use on you." He shrugged. "The only thing you've got left worth taking is over there eating a bread roll, and every family in Boston watched him put his hand on your chest, so they'd have to be insane." "They'd have to be insane," Lucian agreed. "You planned that, Rafe." Lucian almost smiled. "I planned nothing. I walked into a room to prove I was fine, and a 5-year-old dismantled 15 years of my life in about 9 seconds. Later, the light went gold the way it does over that water in June, and Eli went off to conduct an investigation of the flower arrangements at the edge of the tent, and Lucian and Nora stood side by side and watched him. "He's going to steal one," Nora said. "I know. He'll say it fell." "I know." She was quiet for a second. "I drove home from the Castellano wedding last year, telling myself it was a coincidence," she said. "The whole way, 68 minutes. I said it out loud in the car like an idiot. It's a coincidence you'll never see him again. Everything's fine." "Was that what you wanted?" A pause, long enough to be honest. "I don't know what I wanted," Nora said. "I know what I told myself I wanted. Those are usually different things." She looked at him sideways. "Are you glad," Lucian said, "that it wasn't a coincidence?" And Nora Vance, who had moved 6 times in 6 years, who had carried a forged letter in the inside pocket of every suitcase she'd ever owned, who had taught herself for 2,000 nights that she was the kind of thing a man puts down when it gets heavy, held his eyes and did not look away. "Yes," she said. He took her hand, she let him, and then she folded her fingers through his and held on which was different and which he would remember for the rest of his life. Across the lawn, Eli looked back at them. He registered the joined hands with the immediate attention of a child who tracks the state of things, and his face did something specific, a small, satisfied assessment. Like a person who had expected a particular outcome and was pleased to find it had finally arrived. Then he went back to the flowers. Lucian looked down at his own wrist, his father's silver watch, and beside it, replaced twice now because the first two had disintegrated, a small crooked ring of tinfoil that a 5-year-old refolded every few months without ever being asked to and without ever explaining why, because both of them already knew. That's how it works. Eli came back across the grass at a run, one hand behind his back, both of them pretending not to see it. He arrived at speed and inserted himself between them and took a hand from each and looked up first at his mother, then at his father with the expression of someone who has confirmed that everything is in the correct location and is now prepared to proceed. "Can we eat?" he said. "I'm very hungry." "You ate an hour ago," Nora said. "That was a long time ago." Lucian looked at Nora. Nora looked at Lucian. "He's not wrong," Lucian said. And Nora laughed, the real one, the full one, the one that had taken 7 years and a forged letter and a broken heart and a man in a federal prison in Pennsylvania to get back, and it went out across the water like something that had been waiting a very long time for permission. They walked toward the tables, the three of them. Everything that had been hidden was in the open. Every lie had been named out loud in front of the people who needed to hear it. Every debt had been paid, including the one nobody had ever written down. And what was left after all of it had been cleared away was not an empire and not revenge and not even forgiveness. What was left was a boy who knew exactly where he was holding two hands and never once letting go. Because in the end, it was never the guns, the money, or the power that saved Lucian Ferraro. It was a 5-year-old who hadn't spoken in 14 months, who crossed a crowded ballroom and told a room full of dangerous men, the only truth that had ever mattered: I found you. I did it right.